The party was in full swing, a blur of bodies and bass thumps, when my friend, giggling and sloshed, dared me to do it. "Kiss Tom," she slurred, her arm sweeping dramatically towards him. The room, hot and pulsing with anticipation, seemed to hold its breath. My husband, Alex, stood nearby, beer in hand, an amused smile playing on his lips. Why not, I thought, buoyed by the drinks and the charged atmosphere. It was just a game, right? Tom was right there, looking as surprised as I felt, but there was a challenge in his eyes that I couldn't ignore. So, I did it. I kissed Tom, feeling the buzz of the party fade into the background. It was brief, a mere moment, but it sent a jolt through me that I wasn't prepared for. Pulling back, I caught Alex's eye. He was laughing, the sound mingling with the music and the chatter, brushing it off as nothing more than a bit of harmless fun. But the air had shifted, there was a tension now, a crackle that hadn't been there before. The next day, nursing a hangover and a swirl of emotions, my phone buzzed. It was Tom. "Enjoyed that kiss more than I should have," his message read. My stomach did a flip. Replying was a bad idea, I knew that, but politeness won over. "It was just a dare," I typed back, trying to sound casual, dismissive. The conversation should have ended there, but it didn't. We started texting, at first about innocuous things, but it quickly escalated. The texts became the highlight of my day, a secret thrill that I looked forward to with a mix of guilt and excitement. "This is dangerous," a voice in my head warned, but I silenced it. The thrill of secrecy, the allure of something forbidden, kept me coming back for more. 3 weeks into this digital flirtation, Tom suggested we meet up, just as friends. I agreed, telling myself it was harmless. We chose a cozy cafe downtown, somewhere we wouldn't be seen. Sitting across from him, I felt a betrayal of my vows, yet I was drawn to him, captivated by the connection that seemed to have sprouted from that one impulsive kiss. Our meetings became more frequent, a secret we both guarded zealously. We were careful, always choosing places away from prying eyes. Each secret rendezvous added a layer of guilt to my conscience, but the excitement was like a drug. I was hooked. 2 months in, the lies began. Working late, I'd tell Alex, my voice steady over the phone, hiding the tremor of guilt that ran through me. I hated the deception, the way my heart raced for all the wrong reasons. But by then, I was too deep into this affair, caught in the web of my own making. Each step down this path felt like betrayal, yet I couldn't stop. The guilt was overwhelming, a constant shadow that darkened every stolen moment with Tom. But the intensity of our connection, the thrill of the secret, made it impossible to pull away. I was trapped in a cycle of desire and remorse, unable to see a way out without losing everything I held dear. Please take a moment to like and subscribe. It helps us create more content you love. Thank you for your support. In the quiet of a secluded park, with autumn leaves whispering secrets to each other, Tom slipped a bracelet onto my wrist. It was delicate, beautiful, a tangible symbol of our forbidden connection. "Happy birthday," he murmured, his eyes locked on mine. I tucked it under my sleeve, a hidden badge of my betrayal. That evening, curled up on the couch next to Alex, my sleeve rolled up, exposing the bracelet. "That's new," Alex noted, his tone casual but curious. Panic fluttered in my chest. "Oh, this? Just a little something from a coworker." I lied smoothly, the weight of my deceit pressing down on me. Alex smiled, satisfied with the explanation, but the guilt gnawed at me, a relentless reminder of the double life I was leading. Tom's texts started coming in more frequently after that, each message a leash tightening around my neck. "Where are you? Who are you with?" His possessiveness was suffocating, a stark contrast to the exciting thrill it once was. Caught between Alex's unwavering trust and Tom's escalating demands, I felt like I was being pulled apart. During a weekend getaway, amidst the serene backdrop of a lakeside cabin, Alex, with love and hope in his eyes, suggested we renew our vows. "I love you more than ever," he said, his sincerity piercing through the fog of my guilt. Overwhelmed by a mix of love for him and desperation over the mess I'd gotten myself into, I whispered, yes, clinging to the idea of redemption, of wiping the slate clean. But reality crashed back the next day. I met Tom, intending to end things, to sever the ties that bound us in secrecy. I can't do this anymore, I confessed, the words heavy with regret. Tom's reaction was visceral, a mix of anger and desperation. I can't imagine life without you, he said, his refusal to let go igniting a fear in me I hadn't anticipated. The situation escalated when Tom showed up unannounced at a family dinner. Pretending to be in the neighborhood was his thin excuse, but the warning in his gaze was clear as he nodded towards me, a silent threat veiled behind a polite smile. Alex, ever the gracious host, invited him to join us, oblivious to the tension that crackled in the air like a charged storm waiting to break. Sitting at that table, with Alex on one side and Tom on the other, I felt like a fraud, torn between two worlds that could never reconcile. The evening passed in a blur of forced smiles and strained conversation, my heart racing with the fear of my secret life being exposed. Every glance from Tom was a reminder of the precarious edge I was teetering on, a single misstep away from losing everything I held dear. Dinner was a disaster waiting to happen, a ticking time bomb under the guise of a family meal. My phone, tucked away in my purse, buzzed relentlessly, each vibration a sharp reminder of the mess I was in. Tom's texts were like rapid fire, impossible to ignore. I could feel Alex's eyes on me, the weight of his gaze heavy with concern. "You okay?" "You seem off," he asked, his voice laced with worry. I plastered on a smile, my go-to defense mechanism. "Yeah, just tired," I lied, feeling the familiar sting of guilt. But Tom, he wasn't just a problem, he was a hurricane ready to make landfall. His demands escalated quickly, from possessive texts to outright threats. "Tell him, or I will," he warned one night, his voice cold over the phone. The threat hung in the air, heavy and ominous. I felt cornered, trapped by my own choices. Agreeing to meet him seemed like the only way out, a desperate attempt to salvage what little control I had left. "We'll talk tomorrow," I said, my voice barely a whisper, a plan forming in my mind to end this nightmare amicably. The meeting was tense, a high-stakes game of cat and mouse. I poured my heart out, admitting to the affair and my desperate desire to end it, to go back to some semblance of normalcy. Unbeknownst to me, Tom recorded every word, a digital dagger waiting to be plunged into my life. The bomb dropped a week later. Alex received the email, an anonymous gift wrapped in betrayal. The recording laid everything bare, my words echoing in the silence that followed. He confronted me, the pain and betrayal etched deeply into his face. "Is this true?" His voice cracked, the sound of a heart breaking. I could do nothing but confess, the truth spilling out in a torrent of regret. "I'm so sorry," I said, a plea for the forgiveness I knew I didn't deserve. Forgiveness, however, was a bridge too far. The next day, Alex packed his bags, each item a testament to the life we had built together. The house, once filled with laughter and love, felt like a mausoleum, a monument to my mistakes. He left without a backward glance, the finality of his departure a sharp pain that seemed to cleave my heart in two. Left alone in the echoing emptiness of our home, I was confronted with the reality of my actions. The silence was suffocating, a constant reminder of the love I have squandered. I wandered through the rooms, a ghost haunted by memories of happier times, each corner a sharp jab of regret. The magnitude of my loss was overwhelming, a tidal wave that threatened to drag me under. I had gambled everything on a fleeting thrill and lost more than I ever imagined possible. The house, now a prison of my own making, stood as a stark reminder of the cost of my betrayal. The silence was the first thing that hit me, a void where Alex's voice used to be. My attempts to reach out, to explain, to apologize, all met with a digital wall. Blocked on every platform, every message undelivered, every call unanswered. The finality of that silence was a punch to the gut, a clear sign that Alex had closed the door on us, on me, for good. Word got around fast. Our circle of friends, once a source of joy, became couriers of the grim news. Alex had filed for divorce, citing my infidelity as the reason. The whispers of my mistakes echoed in my ears, a constant buzz of judgment. Facing them, facing the reality of what I'd done, was like standing naked in a hall of mirrors, my faults reflected back at me from every angle. The divorce proceedings were a blur, a procession of cold, hard facts laid bare for legal scrutiny. Alex came prepared, evidence in hand, a catalogue of my betrayal. My lawyer's advice was to settle, to avoid dragging out the inevitable. "It's the best you can do under the circumstances," he said, his voice void of the warmth we once shared in our dealings. The settlement was a landslide loss for me. The house, our house, slipped through my fingers, along with the lion's share of everything we'd built together. My financial security, once a solid ground beneath my feet, crumbled into dust. Tom, ever the opportunist, stepped in with offers of support, a shoulder to lean on. But the foundation of our relationship, if it could even be called that, was rotten, built on lies and deceit. His comfort felt hollow, a poor substitute for what I'd lost. The thrill of our secret, now out in the open, had lost its luster, leaving behind a bitter aftertaste of reality. Moving day came, and with it, a tangible sign of my downfall. From our spacious home to a cramped apartment, the downgrade was more than just physical, it was a stark representation of my new reality. The walls of the apartment closed in on me, a constant reminder of the life I'd squandered. Then came the photos, digital glimpses into the life Alex was rebuilding without me. There he was, smiling, surrounded by friends, moving on. Each image was a dagger, twisting in the wound of my betrayal. The knowledge that I was the architect of his pain, and now my own, was a burden too heavy to bear. Tom's presence, once a source of excitement, became a reminder of my folly. Our conversations, once filled with electric anticipation, now felt strained, the silences between us loaded with unspoken regrets. The distance grew, not just physically but emotionally, until one day, the inevitable happened. Tom's messages stopped coming. The thrill, the secrecy, the affair, it all faded into the harsh light of day, leaving me to reckon with the ruins of the life I'd chosen. Left alone with my thoughts, I realized the cost of my actions. Not just the loss of my marriage, my home, my financial security, but the loss of myself. In chasing what I thought I wanted, I'd lost what truly mattered. And as I sat in my cramped apartment, a shell of the life I once knew, the weight of my choices settled around me, a constant companion in my new, diminished reality. The buzz around Alex's promotion reached me through the grapevine, a bittersweet symphony of what could have been. Our mutual friends, in hushed tones over coffee, painted a picture of his success, his ascent in the corporate world, a world I was no longer a part of. "He's doing really well for himself," they said, their words a reminder of the life I had lost. The news stung, not because of jealousy, but because of the realization that Alex's life was flourishing without me. Tom and I, on the other hand, were unraveling at the seams. What started as small disagreements ballooned into full-blown arguments, the trivialities of daily life exposing the fragility of our connection. Without the adrenaline of secrecy fueling our relationship, we were just two people, starkly incompatible. "This isn't working," Tom declared after a particularly petty argument. The truth of his words echoed in the hollows of my heart. The arrival of the final divorce papers felt like a physical blow, a concrete ending to the chapters of my life that had Alex at their center. My hands trembled as I signed them, each stroke of the pen severing the ties that bound us. It was more than just paperwork, it was an admission of my failure, the closing of a door on a part of my life that I would never get back. Reaching out to old friends seemed like a logical step towards rebuilding my life, but the reception was colder than I expected. "I'm really busy this week," became a common refrain, their words polite but their intentions clear. The choices I had made had not only cost me my marriage, but had also fractured friendships I had thought were unbreakable. The isolation was a harsh penalty, the cost of my actions more extensive than I had anticipated. Work, once a refuge from the chaos of my personal life, became another battlefield. My concentration was shot, my performance lackluster. "We need to see some improvement," my boss warned, his disappointment clear. The professional persona I had carefully built over the years was crumbling, just like everything else in my life. Seeing Alex at a mutual friend's wedding was a test of endurance. He was polite, distant, a stranger wearing a familiar face. The space between us was more than just physical, it was a chasm wrought by betrayal, a gap I knew I could never bridge again. The sight of him, happy and unburdened by our past, was a reminder of what I had thrown away. Tom's departure from my life was the final blow, a quiet exit that left a gaping hole in its wake. "I need to focus on myself," he said, his words a mirror of my own thoughts, only too late. The loneliness that followed was a constant companion, a reminder of the cost of my choices. The realization that I had isolated myself from the people who once cared about me was a slow, painful awakening. The loneliness wasn't just a byproduct of my failed relationships, it was a reflection of the choices I had made, the paths I had chosen. My actions had set me adrift, a solitary figure navigating the consequences of decisions that had seemed so inconsequential at the time. The struggle with loneliness was not just about missing the people from my past, it was about coming to terms with the fact that I had alienated myself, that I was the architect of my own solitude. Life's got a twisted sense of humor, doesn't it? Here I am, clocking out from my day job only to head straight to my night gig. The settlement might as well have come with a ball and chain attached, dragging down every step I take with the heavy reminder of my financial woes. My days blend into a monotonous cycle of work, sleep, repeat. The word, exhausting, doesn't even begin to cover it. Then, as if on cue for a reality check, I bump into Alex at a local cafe. It's one of those slow-motion moments where you see the other person and everything around you just blurs. He's polite, offering a nod and a, "How are you?" that's so formal it stings. The air between us is charged with an unspoken acknowledgement of our past and the vast gulf of our present. His demeanor leaves no room for doubt, what we had is well and truly over. As if seeing Alex wasn't a sharp enough reminder of my new reality, whispers of his new relationship find their way to me. It's like a sucker punch to the gut, knocking the wind right out of me. Knowing he's moved on, finding happiness with someone else, it's a stark contrast to the loneliness that's become my constant companion. The divorce, my ill-thought-out adventure with Tom, it's all come at a cost, and not just emotionally. My savings account is a shadow of its former self, bled dry by endless legal bills. Every penny I earn is accounted for before it even warms my bank account. Budgeting isn't just a practice now, it's survival. Night after night, I'm haunted by the ghosts of my decisions. Sleep becomes a battleground where remorse and what-ifs wage war. I toss and turn, replaying moments, words, choices. The nights are long, and the dawn brings no relief, just the start of another grueling day. In a moment of loneliness or maybe desperation, I try dipping my toes back into the dating pool. But it's a disaster. Each date feels like a glaring spotlight on what I've lost, on what could have been. No one measures up to the memory of Alex, to the life we shared. It's not their fault, really. My heart's just not in it, still tangled up in a past I can't reclaim. Then, an invitation arrives. A reunion event, a chance to reconnect with old friends, to maybe stitch back some semblance of social life. But the thought of facing them, of seeing Alex there, happy and in love, it's more than I can bear. The fear of judgment, of pitying looks, it's paralyzing. So, I decide not to go. It's easier, safer, to stay in my cocoon of solitude than to face the music. This chapter of my life, it's not one I ever envisioned. It's as if I'm living someone else's story, watching from the sidelines as my world continues to unravel. The lessons I'm learning are hard, served with a side of loneliness and regret. But here I am, trying to pick up the pieces, trying to find a way forward when every step feels like I'm moving against the current. Just when I thought I'd hit rock bottom, life showed me there's a basement. My struggles at work, a mix of distraction and disinterest, finally caught up with me. We're going to have to move you to a less critical role, my boss said, his words a polite euphemism for a demotion. The financial sting of it was immediate, another blow in a series of defeats. It felt like being kicked while I was already down, struggling to find my footing in a life that no longer made sense. The demotion forced my hand further, pushing me to downsize yet again. I found myself packing boxes, each item a reminder of the life I once lived, now reduced to memories packed away in cardboard. The new apartment was smaller, the walls closing in on me, a physical manifestation of my shrinking world. The move was a silent testament to the spiral of loss that had become my existence. Then, as if to rub salt in the wound, I saw Tom. There he was, hand in hand with someone new, looking happy, unburdened by the past we shared. Surprisingly, the sight didn't sting as I thought it would. Instead, it served as a stark reminder of how far I'd fallen from the person I used to be, a reflection of the choices that led me here. In a desperate attempt to find some semblance of normalcy, I reached out to mutual friends I shared with Alex, hoping to mend fences, to reconnect with a part of my life that felt like it belonged to another lifetime. But the encounters were awkward, strained. The unspoken judgments hung heavy between us, a clear sign that too much had changed, that the bridges back to my old life were too charred to cross. And then, as if I needed any more confirmation of the distance between my past and my present, I saw it on social media. Alex was engaged. The news hit me like a physical blow, a final nail in the coffin of what we once had. There he was, smiling, a look of happiness that I hadn't seen in a long time, not even when we were together. It was the closure I never knew I needed, a painful but clear sign that it was truly over. Now, here I am, sitting alone in this cramped apartment that feels more like a cell than a home. The walls are bare, the space filled with the echo of my regrets. It's in this solitude that the reality of my situation truly sinks in. I've lost everything: my husband, my home, the life we built together, and somewhere along the way, I lost myself too. The cost of a fleeting thrill, a moment of recklessness, has been everything. The silence of the apartment is deafening, a constant reminder of the isolation that has become my world. It's in this quiet that I'm forced to confront the consequences of my actions, to face the wreckage of choices made in moments of weakness. The realization is a bitter pill to swallow, the understanding that I am solely responsible for the ruins around me. This is the bed I've made, a bed of thorns, and lying in it is my penance. The journey here, paved with mistakes and missteps, is mine alone. And as I sit in the dim light of my new reality, I can't help but wonder if this is it, if this is where my story ends, or if, somehow, there's a way to rebuild from the ashes of a life I set ablaze. The weight of regret is a heavy chain, but perhaps, in its links, there's a lesson to be learned, a path to redemption that starts with facing the truth of who I've become and who I. Hey, so here's how it started. I'd been suspecting something fishy for a while, you know? My wife, Jenna, always had this look, like she was hiding something. Like when she'd jump at every text notification, or how she'd suddenly started working late but never talked about her day anymore. Weird, right? So, I did what any guy in my shoes would do: I hired a PI. Yeah, a private investigator. Guy was like something out of a noir film, trench coat and all. When he first showed up, I half expected him to light up a cigarette and start talking about some dame in distress. Anyway, this PI, let's call him Jack, he gets to work. He's got gadgets and gizmos. Felt like I was in a spy movie or something. He starts tailing Jenna, taking photos, the whole 9 yards. And me, I'm trying to act normal, keep the home fires burning. I'm making dinner, asking Jenna how her day was, all while wondering what Jack's finding out. So, a couple of weeks go by, and Jack calls me for a meeting. We sit down in this dingy diner, the kind where the coffee's too strong and the pie is too sweet. He slides this envelope across the table. Inside, there they are. Pictures of Jenna and our neighbor, Rick. Rick, of all people. The dude borrows my lawnmower every other Sunday. And there he is, cozying up to my wife at some fancy restaurant, laughing at some joke, looking like he doesn't have a care in the world. I felt like I'd been sucker punched. Jenna and we'd had our ups and downs, sure, but I never thought she'd do something like this. And with Rick, it was like a bad joke. Rick, who'd come over for barbecue and beers, who'd talk about his fantasy football team like it was the most important thing in the world. And here he was, sneaking around with my wife. I remember driving home that night, the envelope sitting on the passenger seat like some toxic thing. I was angry, sure, but also just tired. Tired of the lies, the secrets, the not knowing. I parked in the driveway and sat there for a while, watching the lights in our house. Jenna was in there, probably watching some reality TV show or scrolling through her phone. And I'm sitting out here, with proof that our life together's a sham. So, I go inside, trying to keep my face blank. Jenna's on the couch, and she looks up, smiles, asks how my day was. And I just nod, say it was fine, nothing special. But inside, man, inside I'm a mess. I'm thinking about how I'm going to confront her, what I'm going to say. Do I throw the pictures in her face? Do I play it cool, gather more evidence? But for that night, I just went to bed, pretending everything was normal. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Jenna, about Rick, about this whole messed up situation. And I realized something. I needed a plan. I couldn't just confront Jenna, not yet. I needed to be smart about this, play the long game. So, that's what I decided to do. I'd play the doting husband, keep my eyes and ears open, and figure out what my next move would be. Little did Jenna know, I was onto her. And Rick, Mr. Friendly Neighbor? He was going to get his, too. It was just a matter of time. One evening, Jenna sits me down, all serious like. She's got this rehearsed speech about open marriage and exploring ourselves. I'm just sitting there, poker-faced, trying to keep my cool. Inside, my mind's racing a mile a minute, thinking about those pies photos of her and Rick. But there I am, nodding like one of those bobblehead dolls, pretending to consider it. Jenna's going on about how we've grown apart, how we need to find ourselves again, you know, all that self-help mumbo-jumbo. She's talking about freedom and new experiences, but all I can hear is, I want to cheat without feeling guilty. The irony, right? There she was, pitching this idea to me, not knowing I already had the scorecard. I throw in a question here and there, playing the part of the intrigued husband. How does this work? Aren't you worried about our relationship? That sort of thing. And Jenna, bless her, she's got answers for everything, like she'd been planning this talk for weeks. Maybe she had. She talked about trust and honesty that almost made me laugh and how it could strengthen our relationship. The whole time, I'm thinking about Rick, Mr. Nice Guy next door, who probably thought he was so clever. And Jenna, who was trying to paint this picture of a modern, open-minded relationship, when in reality, she just wanted her cake and eat it, too. So, I tell her I need time to think about it. It's a big decision, I say, and she nods, looking relieved that I didn't shut it down right away. She's probably thinking she's played her cards right, got me considering this wild idea. Little did she know, I was 2 steps ahead. That night, I lay in bed, Jenna's fast asleep next to me, probably dreaming about her freedom. And I'm wide awake, thinking about my next move. This proposition of hers, it was a curveball, but I could work with it. It gave me an angle, a way to turn the tables. I start imagining different scenarios, how to use this to my advantage. Maybe I could agree to it, see how she reacts. Would she jump at the opportunity, run straight to Rick? Or would she backpedal, realizing I called her bluff? But it wasn't just about catching her in the act anymore. It was about understanding why. Why Jenna? Why Rick? Why this whole mess? I wanted answers, and I wasn't going to rest until I got them. So, I drift off to sleep, a plan forming in my mind. Jenna wanted an open marriage? Well, she was going to get more than she bargained for. I was going to play the game, but on my terms. And at the end of it, I'd be the one holding all the cards. Before we dive into the next chapter of this roller coaster story, I've got a small favor to ask. If you're enjoying this tale of love, adventure, and unexpected twists, how about showing some love? Hit that like button to let me know you're on board. It's a simple click for you, but it means the world to me. It's like a virtual high five, telling me to keep the stories coming. And hey, why stop there? Go ahead and hit subscribe too. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming up next. Okay, so here's the twist. I'm not just gonna sit around feeling sorry for myself. No way. It's time for some good old-fashioned cunning. I start planning, scheming almost. I'm gonna outsmart Jenna at her own game. How, you ask? By becoming the most supportive husband on the planet. Yeah, you heard that right. I'm encouraging her idea, nodding along to her talks about freedom and self-discovery. All the while, I'm collecting evidence, making notes. In my head, it's like, two can play this game. So, I start this double life. By day, I'm Mr. Supportive, telling Jenna to explore, to find her happiness. By night, I'm like a detective in those old films, piecing together the puzzle. I'm checking bank statements for unusual expenses, noting down times she comes home late, even keeping track of her wardrobe choices. You'd be surprised what you can learn from a change in fashion sense. Meanwhile, I keep in touch with the pie, Jack. He's getting more into the nitty-gritty now. We're not just talking about tailing Jenna anymore, we're digging into Rick's life too. Turns out, our friendly neighbor isn't as clean-cut as he seems. Jack's finding connections to some shady characters, the kind you don't want to owe money to. In the midst of all this, I'm doing some soul-searching. What do I want out of all this? Revenge? Closure? I don't even know anymore. But one thing's for sure, I'm not going down without a fight. Jenna thinks she's playing me, but she has no idea what's coming. Every conversation with Jenna, every encounter with Rick, it's all part of the plan now. I'm watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. And it's not just about catching Jenna in the act anymore. I want to understand the whole picture, see how deep this rabbit hole goes. The strategy's simple. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Jenna's my wife, but right now, she's on the other side of the chessboard. And Rick, he's just a pawn in a much larger game. I start making subtle changes too. Working out more, dressing better, even picking up new hobbies. It's all part of the facade, this new version of me that's playing the game. Jenna notices, says I seem different, more alive. If only she knew why. As the days pass, the tension at home is like a ticking time bomb. We're both playing our parts, smiling and pretending, but the air's thick with unspoken truths. It's a psychological game, a battle of wits, and I'm determined to come out on top. So that's the strategy, be the supportive husband, gather the evidence, and wait for the perfect moment to turn the tables. Jenna thinks she's in control, but she's just a player in my game now. And I'm playing to win. Now, while Jenna's off with Rick, I'm not just sitting around, twiddling my thumbs. Nope. I start my own adventure. Kinda like a side quest in a video game, you know? I meet people, make friends. It's a whole new world out there, and I'm diving in headfirst. Some of them are in similar situations, dealing with their own relationship dramas, others are just interesting characters with stories that could fill a book. First up, there's Lisa. She's a bartender at this cozy little joint I stumbled upon. Man, she's got a sharp wit that can slice through the thickest tension. She has this way of talking about life, mixing humor and wisdom, that just makes you see things differently. We chat about everything and nothing, from the meaning of life to the best way to make a martini. She doesn't know my story, the whole Jenna and Rick saga, but her perspectives, they're like a breath of fresh air. Then there's Mark, met him at the gym, of all places. The guy's built like a tank, but he's got a heart of gold. He's going through a rough patch himself, something about a messy divorce. We spot each other, not just with the weights, but in life too. He's got this positive energy, always pushing forward, no matter what. Makes me think, maybe there's a light at the end of this tunnel I'm in. These new connections, they're giving me something I didn't realize I'd lost, a sense of belonging, a feeling that there's more to life than this drama I'm in. It's weird, finding fragments of yourself in strangers. They're showing me different paths, different ways to live, and I'm soaking it all in. I start trying new things, exploring new hobbies. I pick up a guitar, start strumming some tunes. I'm no Hendrix, but hey, it's fun. I even join a local book club, can you believe it? Me, discussing literature over coffee and pastries. It's a far cry from the late-night stakeouts and secret meetings. But here's the kicker: as I'm out there, living this parallel life, I'm learning, growing. These experiences, they're not just distractions, they're shaping me, changing the way I see things. I'm not just the guy whose wife's having an affair anymore, I'm more than that. I'm a friend, a musician in the making, a budding literary critic. And as I'm rediscovering myself, the situation at home becomes clearer. It's like stepping back from a painting and finally seeing the whole picture. Jenna's affair, it's just a part of a larger canvas, and I'm starting to figure out where I fit in it. So, while Jenna's off with Rick, living her double life, I'm on my own journey. Finding new sides of myself, meeting people who light up different parts of my soul. It's an unexpected turn in my story, but hey, isn't that what makes life interesting? Things start getting weird, like really weird. Jenna's acting all jumpy, like a cat on a hot tin roof. Every time her phone buzzes, she's on it faster than lightning, and her eyes dart around like she's expecting the FBI to bust down the door. And Rick, oh boy, he's looking over his shoulder like he's the star of a spy movie. I'm telling you, it's like watching a thriller unfold right in my own backyard. This is where it gets juicy. I'm hearing rumors, whispers around the neighborhood. People are talking about debts, shady deals, and not-so-legal activities. Looks like our Mr. Nice Guy neighbor isn't so nice after all. And my trusty pie, Jack? He's digging up more dirt than a backhoe at a construction site. It's not just affair stuff now, it's big-time trouble. Turns out, Rick's into some seriously bad business, the kind that gets you more than just dirty looks. One day, Jack shows up with this folder, thick as a novel. He's got bank statements, photos, records. It's like Christmas came early for a snoob like me. We're talking illegal gambling, money laundering, you name it. Rick's mixed up in all sorts of shady stuff. And Jenna, she's right there with him, knee-deep in the mud. I start putting the pieces together, and man, it's like a jigsaw puzzle from hell. Jenna's nervous behavior, those late-night whispers on the phone, it all makes sense now. She's not just cheating, she's tangled up in Rick's criminal spider web. Now, I'm not just dealing with a broken marriage, I'm in the middle of a crime drama. And let me tell you, it's not as glamorous as it sounds. I've got to tread carefully, play my cards right. One wrong move, and I could end up in a world of trouble. But the plot thickens, I'm seeing changes in Jenna that I can't ignore. She's not the same woman I married, she's secretive, paranoid, and I can tell she's in over her head. Part of me wants to confront her, shake her out of this nightmare she's walked into. But the other part, the cold, calculating part, tells me to wait. Gather more evidence, build a case so airtight it could float in space. And Rick, he's getting more brazen, more careless. I see him around the neighborhood, throwing glances over his shoulder, meeting with shady-looking characters. It's like he's on a self-destruct button countdown, and I'm just waiting for the explosion. So, there I am, stuck in the middle of this unraveling mess. My wife's tangled up in a criminal's web, and I'm sitting on a mountain of evidence. It's a dangerous game, but I'm in it to win it. I'm not just going to sit back and watch my life crumble. No, sir, I'm going to take control of the narrative, steer this ship through the storm. But let me tell you, it's not easy. Every day brings a new challenge, a new twist. It's like living in a suspense novel, except the stakes are real, and the ending still unwritten. One night, it's like a switch flips in me. Enough is enough. I decide it's time to confront Jenna. No more games, no more waiting. It's like stepping into the ring for the final showdown. I wait for her to get home, sitting in the living room, every light off except for the lamp by my chair. It's all very cinematic, trust me. She walks in, sees me sitting there, and I can tell she knows something's up. Her smile fades faster than a shooting star. I don't waste any time. I lay it all out, the affair, Rick's shady dealings, everything I've learned from Jack and my own detective work. I watch her face go white as a ghost. It's like watching someone realize they've been caught in a trap they didn't even know was there. Jenna stammers, tries to explain, but it's all excuses, you know? The kind of stuff you'd expect in a situation like this. It's not what you think, you've got it all wrong, that sort of thing. But I'm calm, collected, like a judge delivering a verdict. I tell her I know everything. Man, the shock in her eyes, it's something else. It's a mix of fear, guilt, and something else I can't quite put my finger on. But here's the twist, I'm not just angry. I'm disappointed, profoundly disappointed. This was the woman I married, the woman I thought I knew. And here she is, a stranger in my own house. I ask her the questions that have been burning in my mind. Why Rick? Why lie? Why drag me through this hell? Her answers are a jumble of half-truths and tearful apologies. She talks about feeling lost, confused, about how things with Rick just happened. It's like listening to a script from a bad soap opera. I sit there, listening to her unravel the web of lies she's been weaving, and it's almost surreal. This confrontation, it's not just about anger, or it's about closure, about ripping off the band-aid and facing the wound underneath. I needed to hear her say it, needed to face the reality of our broken marriage head-on. And then, I do something that surprises even me. I don't yell, don't throw accusations or insults. I simply tell her that I can't be part of this lie anymore. That the woman I loved, the woman I thought she was, would never have done something like this. It's a quiet moment, but it's powerful. The air is thick with unspoken words and shattered illusions. As the night wears on, we talk more about us, about what went wrong, where we go from here. It's not a pleasant conversation, but it's necessary. We're like two actors at the end of a play, taking off our masks and seeing each other for who we really are. So, that's the confrontation. It's not a fiery explosion of drama and tears. It's a quiet implosion, a realization that sometimes, things just can't go back to the way they were. And as I go to bed that night, I know that a chapter in my life is closing. A painful, messy chapter, but one that's taught me more about myself than I ever thought possible. So, Rick's world starts crumbling like a cookie in a toddler's fist. The cops get involved, and it's not just a small-time thing. We're talking raids, flashing lights, the whole 9 yards. Turns out, Rick's been neck-deep in illegal activity stuff that makes a soap opera plot look like a bedtime story. And Jenna, oh Jenna, she's terrified, realizing she's been playing house with a bona fide criminal. It's like watching a house of cards in a windstorm. 1 minute Rick's Mr. Respectable neighbor, next thing you know, he's being handcuffed and shoved into a police car. The neighborhood's buzzing like a kicked hornet's nest. Everyone's got theories, but I'm sitting back, watching the show with a bucket of popcorn. Metaphorically speaking, of course. Now, Jenna, she's in full panic mode. She comes to me, all tears and apologies. It's like a dam's burst, and years of lies and deceit are flooding out. She's blubbering about not knowing the real Rick, how she got caught up in the thrill of it all. But here's the thing, I'm done. Totally, utterly done. I've seen a different life now, one where I'm not the punchline in someone else's joke. I tell Jenna it's over. No dramatic shouting matches, no throwing plates. Just a calm conversation, which almost makes it worse, right? I've had enough drama to last a lifetime. She's begging, promising change, but it's like the ship's already sunk, and she's offering me a bucket to bail water. The next few days are a blur of moving boxes and legal papers. It's weird how quickly a life built together can be dismantled. I'm dividing up possessions with the precision of a surgeon. Every item is a memory, good or bad, but I'm past clinging to the past. As for Rick, the guy's toast. Legal troubles up to his eyeballs. And the neighborhood? Turns into a real-life crime drama set. People can't stop talking about it. I even overhear a couple of kids trading Rick stories like baseball cards. In the middle of this chaos, I'm finding peace. It's like I've walked through a storm and come out the other side. I'm reconnecting with old friends, picking up hobbies I'd forgotten I loved. It's a rediscovery of who I was before Jenna, before Rick, before this whole mess. Jenna moves out and the house feels different, emptier, sure, but also like a weight's been lifted. I'm turning over a new leaf, rediscovering joys in the little things. Morning coffee tastes better, the sun seems brighter, and I'm smiling more. It's not happiness, not yet, but it's a start. I realize that this downfall, it's not just Rick's or Jenna's. It's the end of a chapter in my life too. But every end's a beginning, right? I'm standing at the start of a new path, and for the first time in a long time, I'm excited to see where it leads. So here's the kicker. Jenna's fairy tale turns into a nightmare. Her affair blows up like a firecracker in her face. Rick? He's trading his suburban castle for a jail cell. And me? I'm like a bird that's just been let out of a cage. Free. It's a whole new world, and I'm standing at the threshold, ready to take the leap. I'm not just talking about moving on. I'm talking about a total life overhaul. I've got these new friends, see? Lisa and Mark, they're like my partners in crime, but the good kind. We've bonded over shared experiences, over stories and laughter. They've shown me that life's got so much more to offer when you're not stuck in a toxic loop. We're planning this road trip, something I've never done before. We're talking about hitting the road, no set destination, just the open highway and a world of possibilities. It's like one of those movies, where the hero hits the road to find himself. Only this time, it's not a movie, it's my life. And Jenna? She's become a chapter in my old life, a lesson learned. I'm not bitter, I'm just done. I've turned the page on that part of my life. There's no revenge plot, no grand confrontation left. Just a quiet acceptance and a determination to build something new. As I pack up my car, I feel lighter, like I'm shedding a skin that no longer fits. I've got my guitar in the back seat, a bag of clothes, and a heart full of hope. Lisa's planning the playlist, and Mark's in charge of snacks. It's a motley crew, but man, it feels right. We hit the road, and with each mile, I can feel the weight of the past fading away. The open road is therapeutic, like a balm to my soul. We stop at diners, chat with strangers, and watch sunsets that paint the sky in colors I've never seen before. This journey, it's more than just a road trip. It's a journey of self-discovery. I'm learning to laugh again, to take risks, to live in the moment. Lisa and Mark, they're not just friends, they're my lifeline to a world I'd forgotten existed. Night falls, and we're sitting around a campfire, sharing stories and dreams. I look up at the stars, and it hits me I'm exactly where I need to be. I'm not defined by my past, by Jenna, or by the mess she left behind. I'm my own person, with a future as wide and open as the night. Life, as I've come to know it, is a tapestry of routines, each thread meticulously woven to maintain a semblance of normalcy. My name is Sophie, a 38-year-old literature teacher, married to Julian, an architect whose passion for his work often eclipses everything else. Together, we have 2 children, a 13-year-old daughter and a 10-year-old son, both engulfed in their own worlds of adolescence and primary school adventures. Our mornings are a predictable flurry of activity. The alarm clock blares at 6:30 a.m., a siren tearing through the silence of dawn. I shuffle out of bed, often finding Julian's side already vacant, a cold reminder of his early starts. The preparation for the day begins in a systematic fashion, brewing coffee, flipping pancakes, reminding the kids to brush their teeth, and double-checking backpacks. At work, the school corridors echo with the familiar cacophony of youthful chatter and locker slams. My days are spent in the embrace of literature, dissecting the intricacies of prose and poetry with students whose interest in the subject varies from passionate to non-existent. I often find solace in the words of the authors I teach, their narratives a subtle escape from the mundanity of my existence. Evenings at home are a mirror of the morning, structured, timed, and predictable. Julian usually arrives late, his face etched with the day's fatigue, often bringing work home. Dinner conversations revolve around mundane topics, school projects, neighborhood gossip, and the occasional planning of family outings that rarely materialize due to Julian's hectic schedule. In the quiet hours, after the children have succumbed to sleep and house hums with the silence of the night, I often find myself sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of tea in hand, staring into the void. These moments are my silent companions, a time to reflect on the day gone by and the one to come, a repetitive cycle that defines my existence. It was during one of these evenings that the past decided to re-enter my life, an unexpected message on social media, a simple, "Hello," from Thomas, a former student, now a writer. Little did I know, this innocuous greeting was the first ripple in the calm waters of my life, a precursor to the storm that was about to unfold. The message from Thomas arrived on a Thursday evening, a blip on the screen that momentarily drew me away from my routine. Thomas had been one of my more memorable students, known for his eloquent essays and a keen interest in classic literature. His message, brief yet courteous, inquired about my well-being and mentioned his recent accomplishment, the publication of his first novel. Curiosity piqued, I responded, congratulating him on his success and expressing a genuine interest in his work. Our conversation, initially revolving around his book and literary pursuits, gradually evolved into a regular exchange. We discussed various authors and their styles, the evolution of literary genres, and the challenges of writing. Thomas's perspective was refreshing, his insights sharp, igniting a spark in our discussions that I hadn't realized I was missing. As weeks turned into months, our communication became a regular part of my evenings. Julian, often preoccupied with his architectural designs, hardly noticed my growing engagement in these online conversations. For me, these interactions with Thomas became a window to a world I had long forgotten, a world where passion for literature wasn't just a professional requirement but a shared enthusiasm. One late autumn evening, Thomas suggested meeting up to discuss a book we had both been reading. The idea, innocent in its inception, seemed like a natural progression of our literary camaraderie. We agreed to meet at a local cafe, a neutral space where the aroma of coffee and the rustle of pages would complement our discussion. The day of the meeting arrived with a mix of anticipation and a sense of normalcy. I chose a simple outfit, nothing too formal, nothing too casual, and left the house under the pretext of an evening with colleagues. The cafe was a quaint little place, nestled between a bookstore and an art gallery, its windows fogged up from the warmth inside. Thomas was already there, seated at a corner table with 2 coffees, his face lighting up as I entered. We greeted each other with a polite awkwardness, a physical manifestation of our previously digital-only interactions. The conversation started with the book but soon meandered through various topics, his writing process, my teaching experiences, and subtle glimpses into our personal lives. As the evening wore on, I found myself engrossed in our conversation, the hours slipping away unnoticed. It was only when the cafe staff began closing up that we realized how long we had been there. Parting ways, we agreed to meet again, both under the guise of our shared literary interests. Little did I realize then, that this meeting was the beginning of a journey that would lead me down a path far removed from the predictable life I had been living. The meetings with Thomas became a more frequent occurrence, evolving from discussions about literature to sharing personal anecdotes and laughter. It was a refreshing change from my daily life, a secret escape that I looked forward to with increasing anticipation. Our conversations were no longer confined to the walls of the cafe. They spilled over into walks in the park, visits to local bookstores, and quiet dinners in discreet corners of the city. Julian, immersed in his work, remained oblivious to these developments. At home, I maintained the facade of normalcy, performing my roles as a wife and mother with practiced ease. However, inside, I felt a growing disconnect from the life I was leading and the one I was secretly yearning for. As spring turned to summer, the nature of my relationship with Thomas began to shift. What started as intellectual attraction slowly morphed into something more. The realization hit me one evening when Thomas casually took my hand as we walked. The contact was brief, but it sent a jolt through me, awakening feelings I hadn't experienced in years. One night, after a particularly engaging dinner, Thomas walked me to my car. The air was warm, and the streets were bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. It was then, in that moment of solitude, that our relationship crossed the line. A kiss, hesitant at first, then deepening with a passion that surprised us both, sealed our descent into an affair. The following weeks were a whirlwind. We met more frequently, each encounter intensifying our connection. Messages and calls filled the gaps between our meetings, creating a constant presence in each other's lives. I was aware of the risks, the potential devastation it could bring to my family, but I was too entangled in the web of the affair to pull away. Despite the guilt that gnawed at me, I continued to meet Thomas. Our liaisons were carefully planned to avoid suspicion, often under the guise of work-related meetings or outings with friends. The thrill of the secret, combined with the intensity of our connection, created a bubble around us, isolating us from the reality of our actions. As autumn approached, the inevitability of our situation began to weigh on me. I knew that what we were doing was wrong, that it was only a matter of time before our secret world would collide with reality. The thought of hurting Julian and my children filled me with dread, yet I felt powerless to end the affair. It was a precarious balance, a dance on the edge of a precipice, and I was all too aware that one misstep could send everything crashing down. But in the midst of it all, I was unable to resist the pull of the affair, caught in the grip of something that felt larger than life, yet fraught with the potential for destruction. The precarious balance of my double life began to unravel one evening in late autumn. Julian, who seldom pried into my affairs, accidentally stumbled upon a string of messages from Thomas on my phone. The messages, laden with endearments and plans for future meetings, laid bare the truth I had been hiding. Confrontation was inevitable. That night, as I returned home, I was met with a somber silence that blanketed the house. Julian sat at the kitchen table, my phone beside him, his expression a mix of hurt and disbelief. The air was thick with tension as I braced myself for the inevitable. "Is there something you want to tell me?" Julian's voice was calm, but it bore the weight of 1,000 unspoken accusations. The words caught in my throat, guilt and fear intertwining, rendering me momentarily speechless. The conversation that ensued was a painful unraveling of the lies I had woven. Julian's questions, direct and piercing, demanded honesty, and with each answer, the facade of our marriage crumbled. I admitted to the affair with Thomas, trying to explain the how and why, but the words sounded hollow even to my own ears. Julian's reaction was a mixture of anger, hurt, and confusion. He struggled to comprehend how I, the woman he had loved and trusted for over 15 years, could betray him in such a manner. The questions he asked were ones I had asked myself countless times. Why did I do it? What was I looking for? Did I ever think of the consequences? That night, the house felt colder than usual, the walls echoing with the remnants of our shattered trust. Julian slept in the guest room, a physical manifestation of the emotional chasm that had opened between us. The reality of what I had done, the magnitude of my betrayal, began to sink in. In the days that followed, our home became a battleground of emotions. Julian oscillated between anger and sorrow, while I grappled with guilt and regret. Discussions about the future of our marriage were fraught with uncertainty. Julian was clear about one thing. The children should not be made to suffer because of our issues. I suggested counseling, a desperate attempt to salvage what was left of our marriage. Julian, though hesitant, agreed. It was a small glimmer of hope in an otherwise dark situation. However, the path to healing was fraught with obstacles, the foremost being whether we could ever rebuild the trust that had been so thoroughly broken. As we embarked on this uncertain journey, I couldn't help but reflect on the irony of my situation. In seeking something that I thought was missing in my life, I had risked everything that truly mattered. The affair, which had once seemed like an escape, now felt like a chain that bound me to a future filled with uncertainty and remorse. In the wake of the confrontation, the atmosphere in our home became one of palpable tension. Julian and I moved through our days like strangers, our interactions limited and strained. The children, sensing the shift, reacted in their own ways. Our daughter became quiet and withdrawn, while our son displayed bouts of anger and confusion. Amidst this turmoil, I continued to grapple with my own turmoil. The affair with Thomas, now ended abruptly, left a void, but it was overshadowed by the guilt and the pain I saw in Julian's eyes every day. I knew I had to make things right, not just for my sake, but for our family. Julian, for his part, was torn. The man I knew, who once spoke of forgiveness and understanding, was now distant, his pain evident. Yet, he didn't ask for a divorce. Instead, he suggested we maintain a semblance of normalcy for the children until we figured out what to do next. The counseling sessions began, a weekly ritual where we laid bare our feelings and grievances under the guidance of a therapist. Julian spoke of his sense of betrayal and loss of trust. I listened, each word a reminder of the hurt I had caused. I talked about the loneliness and disconnection I had felt in our marriage, which led me to seek solace elsewhere. The therapist worked with us to understand our emotions and to find a path towards healing or closure. Meanwhile, Thomas tried to reach out to me, but I ignored his attempts. My focus was on repairing the damage I had caused to my family. Yet, the strain of the situation was evident. Our home, once a haven of love and laughter, had turned into a place of silent battles and unspoken grief. As the weeks turned into months, Julian and I made an effort to be civil to each other, especially in front of the children. We attended school events, had family dinners, and maintained the routines that had anchored our family life. But the undercurrent of tension was always there, an invisible barrier that kept us from truly reconnecting. The turning point came one evening when our daughter, unable to bear the silent conflict, broke down in tears. She begged us to stop pretending and to be honest about what was happening. That night, Julian and I had a long, heart-to-heart conversation. It was the first time since the confrontation that we had really communicated. We talked about our marriage, our children, and what we both wanted for the future. The conversation was difficult, but it was necessary. It became clear that while Julian was willing to work on our marriage, the path to rebuilding trust was going to be long and uncertain. The possibility of our family staying intact seemed slim, but we agreed to keep trying, for the sake of our children. The chapter closes with Sophie reflecting on the complexity of their situation, recognizing the long road ahead in either healing or parting ways, and the impact their decisions would have on their family. The challenges of rebuilding our family were compounded by an unexpected factor, Thomas. After I had ended our affair, I hoped he would respect my decision and move on. However, it became apparent that Thomas was not ready to let go. His attempts to contact me grew more frequent and insistent, shifting from regretful messages to outright pleas and, eventually, to thinly veiled threats. Thomas's persistence added an extra layer of stress to an already strained situation. I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, fearful of an encounter that could further jeopardize my efforts to mend my marriage. His messages, which I had initially ignored, became impossible to overlook when he started hinting at making our affair public. Julian, already struggling with the betrayal, became even more troubled when he learned about Thomas's behavior. The knowledge that someone else was aggressively trying to insert themselves into our already fragile situation added a new dimension of tension between us. Our therapist advised me to be transparent with Julian about Thomas's actions. Following this advice, I showed Julian the messages. He read them, his expression a mix of anger and concern. We discussed the possibility of taking legal action if Thomas's behavior escalated, but we both hoped it would not come to that. The situation with Thomas reached a critical point one evening when he unexpectedly showed up at a restaurant where Julian and I were trying to have a quiet dinner. His appearance was shocking, not just for the confrontation it promised, but for the potential scene it could cause. Thomas approached our table, his demeanor erratic, demanding to speak with me. Julian stood up, positioning himself between Thomas and me, a clear sign of his intention to protect. The altercation was brief but intense, with Thomas loudly accusing me of betrayal and Julian demanding he leave. The restaurant staff intervened, and Thomas was eventually escorted out, but the damage was done. The incident left us shaken and more aware of the potential danger Thomas posed. In the days that followed, Julian and I took steps to ensure our family's safety. We informed the school of the situation, cautioning them to be vigilant. We also spoke to a lawyer about a restraining order against Thomas. These actions, necessary as they were, felt like an intrusion into the life we were trying to rebuild, a constant reminder of the affair's far-reaching consequences. The ordeal with Thomas was a harsh wake-up call. It highlighted not just the personal toll of my actions, but also the external threats that could arise from choices made in secrecy. As we dealt with the aftermath of the confrontation at the restaurant, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of responsibility for the chaos that had engulfed our lives. The incident with Thomas at the restaurant was a stark reminder of how deeply our family life had been affected by my actions. The tension at home, already high, escalated further as Julian and I grappled with the additional stress caused by Thomas's intrusion. Our children, sensitive to the changing dynamics, exhibited signs of emotional distress. Our daughter's performance at school began to suffer, and our son became increasingly withdrawn. Julian and I were struggling not just with our personal issues, but also with the need to provide a stable environment for our children. The counseling sessions continued, focusing not only on the issues between us but also on how to best support our children through this tumultuous period. We sought guidance on how to communicate with them about what was happening in a way that was age-appropriate and reassuring. Despite the challenges, Julian and I made concerted efforts to maintain a semblance of normalcy for the sake of our children. We kept up with family routines, attended school events together, and tried to ensure that home life remained as stable as possible. However, the strain was evident. Our interactions, though civil, were often forced, and the distance between us was palpable. During this period, I reflected a lot on my choices and their impact. The affair, which had started as a means of seeking something missing in my life, had spiraled into a situation that threatened the very foundation of my family. The guilt I felt was overwhelming, compounded by the sight of my children's confusion and pain. Julian, despite his own hurt, showed a remarkable strength in dealing with the situation. He was actively involved in the children's lives, providing them with the support and stability they needed. His ability to put aside his feelings for the sake of our children was something I admired, even as it served as a painful reminder of the damage I had caused. As we navigated these challenges, the legal situation with Thomas was resolved. The restraining order was granted, providing us with a sense of security, though the fear of what he might do lingered. This resolution, however small, was a step towards regaining control over our lives. The chapter closes with Sophie acknowledging the complex web of consequences resulting from her affair. The realization that her actions have caused deep and possibly irreparable damage to her family weighs heavily on her, even as she and Julian strive to navigate this challenging period together. As autumn gave way to winter, the fragile equilibrium in our household began to shift. The combined weight of the affair, the issues with Thomas, and the ongoing strain on our family took its toll. Julian and I, despite our best efforts, were drifting further apart. The gap that had formed between us seemed insurmountable, and the counseling sessions, once a place for open communication, became a forum for airing grievances and disappointments. The realization that our marriage might not survive became increasingly apparent. Julian, once willing to consider reconciliation, began to speak of separation as a real possibility. The discussions about our future, which had been tinged with hope, now took on a tone of resignation. During this period, our children continued to struggle. Our daughter, caught in the tumult of teenage years and the chaos at home, became more rebellious. Our son, younger and less able to articulate his feelings, showed signs of anxiety. Julian and I were united in our concern for them, but divided in everything else. The turning point came unexpectedly one evening. Julian and I had a particularly tense exchange, which escalated into a heated argument, the first time our emotions had spilled over so visibly. The children overheard, and their reactions, fear, confusion, tears, were a stark reminder of the impact our issues were having on them. That night, after the children were asleep, Julian and I had a long, difficult conversation. It was clear that while we both cared deeply for our children, our marriage was beyond repair. The love and trust that had once bound us together had been eroded by my betrayal and the subsequent events. We discussed the possibility of separation, a topic that was painful but necessary. The idea of dividing our family, of not seeing our children every day, was heart-wrenching, but we had to consider what was best for them in the long term. We agreed to seek legal advice on how to handle the separation in a way that would minimize the impact on the children. As I lay in bed that night, the reality of the situation washed over me. My affair, which had started as a misguided attempt to find validation and excitement, had led to the unraveling of my family. The enormity of my mistake was clear, and the knowledge that I was responsible for the pain and disruption in our lives was a burden I would carry with me. This chapter marks a pivotal moment in the story, where Sophie and Julian come to terms with the fact that their marriage cannot be salvaged, and begin to face the reality of separation, all while trying to protect their children from further harm. The decision to separate, once spoken aloud, set in motion a series of actions that felt both necessary and heartbreakingly final. Julian and I began the process of disentangling our lives, a task that was as much legal and logistical as it was emotional. We met with lawyers to understand the implications of our separation and to ensure that our children's well-being remained at the forefront of any arrangements. Our home, once filled with the sounds of a bustling family, became a space marked by silence and unspoken sadness. We informed our children of our decision, trying to explain the situation in a way that was honest yet reassuring. Their reactions were a mix of sadness, anger, and confusion. We reassured them of our love and our commitment to remaining active and present in their lives, despite the upcoming changes. The process of separation was methodical and, at times, overwhelmingly bureaucratic. We discussed living arrangements, finances, and co-parenting schedules. Each discussion, while necessary, was a reminder of the finality of our decision. Julian and I tried to keep our interactions civil and focused on practical matters, but the undercurrent of hurt and regret was always present. As we navigated this new reality, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought us here. The affair with Thomas, which had once seemed like an exciting escape from the monotony of my life, now appeared as a series of misguided choices that had led to the destruction of my family. The guilt and remorse I felt were profound, and I struggled with the knowledge that my actions had caused so much pain to the people I loved the most. Throughout the separation process, Julian and I maintained our commitment to our children. We attended their school events together, celebrated holidays as a family, and kept up with the routines that provided them with a sense of stability. But the dynamic had changed irrevocably. We were no longer a couple, but two individuals coexisting for the sake of our children. As the final paperwork was signed and our marriage officially came to an end, I felt a deep sense of loss. The finality of the divorce was not just the end of our relationship, but the closing of a significant chapter of my life. Julian and I parted ways with a mutual understanding of the irreparable harm that had been done, in a shared hope that we could both find a way to move forward, separately but with a continued commitment to our children. The chapter closes with Sophie coming to terms with the end of her marriage and the realization of the long-lasting consequences of her actions. The focus is on the practical and emotional aspects of the separation and the efforts to maintain a sense of normalcy for their children in the midst of this significant life change. The finalization of our divorce marked the beginning of a new, uncharted chapter in my life. The aftermath of the affair and the unraveling of my marriage left me in a state of introspection. I spent long hours reflecting on my choices, the hurt I caused, and the lessons I had learned from this painful journey. Life as a single mother was a new terrain filled with challenges and adjustments. I juggled work, parenting, and the responsibilities of running a household on my own. The time I spent with my children became even more precious, and I focused on rebuilding my relationship with them, being there for them in ways I hadn't been before. Julian and I settled into a co-parenting routine, communicating primarily about matters related to the children. Despite the end of our marriage, we shared a common goal of ensuring that our children felt loved and supported. We were no longer partners, but we remained connected through our shared love for our kids. The experience with Thomas, which had once consumed me, now felt like a distant memory, a chapter one wished to leave firmly in the past. I learned that seeking fulfillment outside of my marriage had not only hurt those I loved, but had also led me away from confronting the issues in my own life and relationship. As the seasons changed, so did my perspective on life. I began to find joy in the small, everyday moments, reading a book in silence, watching my children play, and finding satisfaction in my work. I started attending a support group for individuals, which provided a sense of community and understanding. Sharing my story and hearing those of others helped me realize that while my choices were my own, I was not alone in facing the consequences. I also embarked on a journey of self-discovery, exploring my interests and passions, some of which I had neglected over the years. I took up writing, a hobby I had always loved but never pursued seriously. The act of putting pen to paper was therapeutic, a way for me to process my thoughts and emotions. Looking back, I understood that life is a tapestry of choices, each thread intertwined with consequences. My affair was a choice that led to pain and loss, but it also brought hard-earned lessons about love, trust, and forgiveness. I learned the importance of being true to oneself and the value of facing problems head-on rather than seeking escape in illusions. As I moved forward, I did so with a newfound sense of self-awareness and a hope for the future. I knew the road ahead would have its share of challenges, but I felt better equipped to face them. The scars of the past would always be a part of me, but they no longer defined me. Instead, they served as reminders of my journey and the resilience I had discovered within myself. The chapter, and thereby the book, ends with Sophie embracing her new life, carrying the lessons learned from her past experiences, and looking forward to a future filled with possibilities